Welcome to the TRXL podcast. I'm Evan TRXL, and in this episode, I welcome back Robert Yuen. Robert is the CEO and co-founder of Monograph, a company on a mission to radically transform the business of architecture. As a trained architect turned entrepreneur, Robert has spent years focused on building tools that help architects run better businesses, and in this episode, we go deep on one of Monograph's boldest moves yet, the publication of their latest benchmark report. It's a fantastic resource for our industry, and I've included a link to the free download in the show notes if you'd like to grab your own copy. In this conversation, we explore the topics of radical transparency, data-driven decision-making, and how financial literacy can elevate both individual careers and firm-wide performance. Robert breaks down why most industry reports are flawed, how Monograph is using real-time anonymized data to shift the narrative, and why understanding metrics like revenue per employee and utilization rate is essential for the future of practice. We also discuss the challenges of shifting firm culture, how transparency can empower project teams, and the steps firms can take today to align around sustainable growth. One of the key themes from this episode is that transparency in architecture must become the new standard. For too long, critical aspects of practice like project financials, performance benchmarks, and even salaries have remained hidden or vague, leaving teams disconnected from the real constraints and opportunities in the business. Robert makes the case that radical transparency isn't just a nice to have, it is the foundation for healthier, more resilient firms. Whether you're an emerging designer or a firm leader, this conversation offers a compelling look at why open access to data and firm performance is essential for aligning teams, increasing profitability, and empowering everyone to do their best work, as scary as that might sound. And if you stick around until the end, I'll come back to this theme and break it down more to wrap things up. As always, there is a robust list of additional resources and links in the show notes. Paid TRXL Plus members will see them right in your podcast app, and free listeners can head over to TRXL.co to access the full list. If you find value in this episode, please consider sharing it with your colleagues and network. You can also join the conversation on LinkedIn, where I'll have a post about it, or you can leave a comment on YouTube. I always love hearing your feedback, and I love seeing the back and forth between the listeners. This one is packed with actionable insights and big picture thinking, so let's get into it. Without further ado, I bring you my conversation with Robert Yuen. Robert Yuen, welcome back to the TRXL podcast. I was looking at my notes. The last time we talked was April. The last time your episode came out, and you've been on twice before, was in June of last year. So it's been a while.
Oh my
And
God.
the last time we talked, I was looking up some of my notes, and we talked about prioritizing culture and purpose in the organization, embracing transparency and feedback, which I think you have honed in on even more. We're going to talk about that today.
Yes.
Focusing on employee well-being, so work-life balance. And I think one of the things you were talking about was 4-day work weeks was one of the big things back then. And then investing in continuous learning. I'm sure all of this kind of plays into what I've seen you be touting recently, which is this, the royal we, need to bring radical transparency to this industry. So welcome back to the show, and let's dive right into this. This is a really pointed topic.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm all yours. Thank you again for hosting, and I want to be a huge supporter for your audience, and let's have a good time.
Let's start off with the benchmark and just tell us kind of what it is and how you guys put this together.
So the benchmark was an idea, and this is our second version. Really, really proud of it. As our customer base grows and the success of Monograph continues to grow, I think it's really, really important for the industry to have some type of benchmark of what an industry and firm size and firm typologies, what performance look like across the board. This is from a firm-wide performance down to individual architect and designer performance, from total revenue down to revenue per employee, from payment durations to utilization rates. What's amazing is, instead of running a survey, which I believe is almost always flawed in a lot of ways, if you ask someone for their opinion, or opinion is usually based on an opinion and not facts, we are in a really unique position where we can say, let's look at our customers and let's anonymize that data and let's report back to the world in terms of like how our customer base is doing. What's fascinating is we can see amazing trends that happen over time, especially from the day a customer starts to the moment that a customer matures into a 1-year customer, 2-year customer, 3-year customer. And then since there are other reports out there like AIA, we can also compare our customer base to what other industries and other organizations have published.
And so when you talk about these other types of organization publications that have come out, do you know how they're obtaining their data? Is it survey? Is it a combination of that plus data? Maybe a link with Dell Tech, for example? I don't know.
Yeah, so like I think a lot of the industry is very familiar with AIA's like monthly business report.
Right.
That is a survey.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm almost always very skeptical, because if you catch someone on a good day, like the business is doing really, really well. If you catch someone on a bad day, maybe the business is not doing so well. And I would much rather look at the industry's performance based on a data set that's not rooted on an opinion or a survey.
Yeah, so the data that's in your report comes directly through Monograph, which people are using to run their business.
Correct.
Right? So
Correct.
maybe explain a little bit more about like who, and not firm names, obviously that's anonymized, but like give us an idea of who's kind of participating in this so that we understand that.
Yeah, so we have a customer base, and we have customers that are as small as solo practitioners and as large as firm sizes of 100 employees. We generally don't have any customers that are larger than 100. And our running average customer size is right around 10 employees.
Okay.
So, and I think that gives everyone a general idea of like our customer base is pretty wide, but the meat of our customer base is firm sizes that employ anywhere between 5 to about 15 and a running average around 10.
Okay. And that falls kind of within this metric that I've heard, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but that like 80, 90 something percent, it's a high percentage of the profession is firms in the 1 to 10 size number.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
And that's a big reason why we focus exactly where we focus.
Yeah.
Because it's where I believe and where the team believes we can add the most value.
Right.
I think there's a problem when I'll use AIA for example. If your data set is coming primarily to Dell Tech, and Dell Tech's customer base is primarily super large, right? It isn't really a good representation of the industry, considering that's already a very small subset of the industry uses Dell Tech. Mm-hmm. A very small subset of the industry are large firms, where almost 90% of the industry is small, and they're not. So there's two different sets of problems. One, you're surveying, which is I don't believe is the right way to look at analyzing and understanding the market trend without actually looking at the data. The second problem is you're surveying the wrong people to describe an entire industry. You should, like, if you're going to really take a good understanding of the industry, knowing that 90% is small firms, you should be looking at the small firms.
Yeah.
But then that wouldn't be the right organization to be gathering that data.
Interesting. So this idea of kind of a representative cross-section doesn't really exist. And I think the other thing that I take away from what you just said with the reports that come out from AIA is that then it is displayed as data when it comes from survey material. And so then it becomes, if it looks like it's in a chart, it looks like, oh, we can really rely on this as information to base our, strategies on, for example. So I think that's kind of a real big differentiator. It's a very important point about the report that you're talking about having created with Monograph versus some of the other stuff that's available out there.
I truly believe that. Like, yeah. I think a lot of the industry have been making a lot of really important decisions for almost our entire life as an architect and engineering profession on data that is unreliable, which is really, really bad, because then it almost assumes that you're going to make the wrong decision, because like you're making decisions off of data that's not correct.
Yeah. And I think the topics come up even on this, between the two of us before about, there's a lot of fiction in time tracking in offices right? Which people are then using to
Yes.
talk about future performance on projects, how you sell your design services, how you break that back into phases, how much time things should take to do, how you staff those projects. And like you say, if you start off with a bad foundation and you build all that on top of it, then it's very difficult to have a successful outcome.
It's near impossible. Like, let's say you pour the foundation for a single family, but you want to put 100-story tower on top of that foundation. It's not going to work. It's just, it was never designed to work because your foundation was fundamentally not appropriate.
Right.
So I think tracking the right data, using the right data, and then making synthesis and analytical decisions off of that is really, really important. But it starts with using the right set of information first. If not, you're still going to make decisions, but you're making decisions on the incorrect set of information.
Right. So when you are using data from Monograph to build this report, are firms opting into this? You talked about anonymizing it. So I'm just curious, do they know you're using this information to then start to build this conversation around radical transparency? Like, you have this big picture vision. I'd love for you to explain that, but also maybe just how you got to be able to do this.
So I think it's our responsibility. It's our responsibility building an amazing product to help architectural firms be extraordinarily successful. And we can measure if we're successful by looking at if our customers are doing better than when they were not a customer.
Yeah, sure.
And as long as they're doing better, I think we're doing a great job of building a world-class product. Second, I think when our customers opt in to buy the product, they're presented with terms of service, and it's there that, like, look, we have to look at your data. We have to use your data to continue to make the product better. We use that data to figure out where we want to continue to improve our product roadmap and how we make decisions on our product roadmap. But I think it's also our responsibility to anonymize that data and report back to the industry. So even if you're not a Monograph customer, at least there's a data set out there that's rooted on true data, not opinions and not surveys, for the industry to respond to and kind of model against.
Yeah. And this idea of actually using it so that people can know what's going on outside of their organization and be able to compare themselves to other firm data that exists, get outside of the silo that they've been in, right? To be able to have access to that. That's a big deal. Like, I mean, I assume this plays directly into what you call, this idea for bringing radical transparency to the industry. This is a huge part of that, right? Because it's like, if you don't know then you're just going based on what somebody would say during a conversation or what they'd be willing to share behind closed doors, maybe, and you don't know how that's been modified to create a perception about their firm or whatever, right? I mean, we're talking about something completely different and potentially new to the industry with this kind of information.
You and I have been in the industry for a long time. So you and I have been in some of those small rooms where we discuss revenue, where we discuss salaries, where we discuss costs and running a business. I think it's amazing that we had those discussions in the past. And I think it's a disservice that discussion isn't more public. And I would love to include as many people as possible, the entire industry as possible. Because I do think it's going to move the needle. And I do think if you anonymize the data, then it sets as a benchmark. It's a guiding post. Yeah. It allows you to kind of like self-reflect and know where you stand. And if you're a high performer as an organization, that's amazing. And if you're a low performer, at least you can now have a guiding post, a roadmap of what good looks like and what great looks like.
Let's take a quick break from the conversation to tell you about Avail. Is your team struggling to find the BIM assets they need? Avail's content management system simplifies access to all of your firm's content in one easy-to-use platform. No matter where your files live or what type of files they are, you can easily search and access them from Avail. Now, designers can consistently find and reuse all types of content. So what does that mean? Well, standards-compliant models and drawings are easier to create. The documentation process is less chaotic. New hires are easier to onboard. Projects are delivered faster with fewer errors. You get the idea. Visit getavail.com to try Avail for free and request a free demo. That's getavail.com, GETAVAIL.com. My thanks to Avail for supporting this episode of the TRXL podcast. And now let's get back to the conversation. Yeah, I think that right there is a really important point. There's so many pieces of architecture that are totally opaque to people coming into it or trying to figure out a path forward, whether it's a new business model or a new department, or, there's lots of, ways to do project delivery, ways to gain efficiency and productivity. And there's like, who do you turn to, right? How do you find that information? It is not, those aren't the kinds of things that we're trained in architecture school, right?
Correct.
So a lot of times we're bringing in somebody to run the business side of the operation, and then they have their limited set of experiences from the firms or whatever that they've worked for that comes into that. But now you're actually creating a landscape that people can look out to and start to get those insights because a platform like yours exists that has this cross-section throughout the industry to be able to use that information and raise the entire thing up if people want to read it and participate in that.
And I'm really excited because the more we grow, the more our data set becomes more of an industry leading indicator. And the more refined we can continue to dig in. I hope one day we can break things down to regions, firms within regions, firm within typologies of work, firms that have specialized skill sets versus others, and really start to group and look at things at a much more micro perspective. And we'll get there. I think the more customer base that we have, the heavier the responsibility is for us to report back out.
Nice. So give us an idea of what types of things are found in the report. The report's free. We'll put a link to it in the show notes so people can download that and read it themselves. Just give us the 30,000 foot overview.
The 30,000 overview is, generally speaking, as a Monograph customer, you make more money and you're more efficient. And you make substantially more compared to a firm that's not using any tools. And then you also make substantially more when you're compared to when you're using a tool that's not Monograph as well. And it starts to set the tone in terms of where total earnings might come from and how profit is really, really important for a firm. Considering if you're a firm owner, that salaries tend to cap out. And then a lot of the potential upside for firm ownership is going to come from your ability to produce a profit margin at the end of the year. So then it really starts to highlight the conversation around what your economics look like and what your efficiency looks like for the firm.
Yeah. Well, can you substantiate that in some way when you say that firms who use Monograph are more profitable? I mean, that to me sounds like that's awesome. And why? I want to know why. Why are they? Is it because you have a door now so that you can start to change behavior in those firms and make talking about profit a priority? Or give us kind of some of the ideas that are enabling that to happen.
I do think it's a number of different unique features here on Monograph that makes it really, really much more easier. I think if I were to generalize, I'll start with, if you don't have any type of leading indicator in your business, any type of data, you're essentially making decisions blind. And I do agree, if you're going to use any tools, you should do better. Because that will give you at least some line of sight to how to make decisions and what to address on a week-over-week, month-over-month, quarter-over-quarter cadence. Once we zoom in, I think we spend an absurd amount of time focused on how do we design the best product, and best is categorized by how do we serve an industry where everyone understands the world visually. So how do we essentially make data visualize? What is the representational language that architects can understand and make decisions? Which is, to be very honest, very, very hard to do. Because historically, any type of financial data is presented in a language that is suited for a bookkeeper and accountant, someone who has a much higher financial literacy than an average architect.
Mm-hmm.
Our biggest job is we already have a lot of that data. How do we make that information digestible representationally in a way that architects and engineers understand? Because if you can understand it quickly, then you can ideally make the right decisions along the way. We take it one step lower. The goal is ideally to make decisions to help an architect stay on course before you have to invoice. I was an architect for a long time. One of the biggest problems is you don't really understand that there's a problem until you do an invoice. The problem with that is that might be 1 month, 2 months, 6 months later after doing a lot of work before you recognize that you're off track. So there got to be a lot of signals in the software that tells you that today, before you invoice, you're already trending in a negative direction. You should do something about it. And I think that helps a lot of our customers make smarter decisions, faster decisions, before things go completely upside down.
Yeah, right. So maybe you can just talk about this idea of radical transparency, because I think what we're starting to get into is this, like, what needs to change in the industry. And so you've been couple times now that I've seen on LinkedIn posting about we need to bring radical transparency to the industry, and you've started to put up some posts that speak to that. Can you just give us another overview now? You're the overview guy. If you can tell us kind of what you mean by that, because I think that could be interpreted in different ways, and so I want to hear it straight from you.
I really do mean we should talk about, as much as the industry feels very comfortable talking about, to make sure that we address the problem. So it could be as high level as what the firm bills and what the firm makes, all the way down to salaries and expenses. So I would rather have us be completely open door and we talk about every single metric and number across the board. I also have a complete understanding that that might not be, let's say, comfortable.
Yeah, I was going to say, you said comfortable a minute ago, and I was like, I don't know a lot of people who would be comfortable, but it is like, but again, it comes back to why you would want to do that, right? I mean, once you put the argument out there, you can't ignore it. So Continue. Sorry.
Right. So I think there are a few, I'll give you examples where I don't think the industry's just spent a ton of time being super open. I think salaries are a very difficult topic. I think salaries are pegged to geographies, they're pegged to skill sets, and they're pegged to levels. So it's actually a very hard thing to talk about publicly. I do think you can generalize it across, like, let's say, roles, states, and like averages. Where I think is really, really important is around project performance. I think it's incredibly hard to ask a project team that might include a project designer, project manager, project architect, a few designers, and maybe a junior architect here and there, to execute and work on a project without having a clear line of sight of what the financials look like. Why are deadlines the way they are, not just on dates, but also on the finances? And what does good look like if we achieve, if we work on this for the next 6 months or 1 year? I think we have to start there. And then we have to get it right before we expand to other parts of the business.
It's interesting to think about how firms actually work when you're having this discussion. Because when you talk about members of a team, they go to work to do a good job, a great job on their project. But they're not focused on what their performance does to directly affect the bottom line of the business. I'm generalizing, but I think that feels right to me, right? And so it's like, I know a lot of architects who will do anything for the project and have an adversarial relationship with the company they work for, right? As an example, right? Yeah. It's like, there is this kind of dichotomy going on, I think, a lot of times, where it's like the project means more than the employer a lot of times. And of course, that's not always true, but there is kind of this weird relationship going on there. And so if I'm willing to do anything for the project to be successful because my reputation is directly tied to that project, at least the perception of it is, right? And then maybe that has repercussions when it comes to bonus time, because of performance on a project and things like that. But that's always pretty opaque in itself in these companies, right? So it's like, I know a lot of times we've sat in performance reviews and it's like, what do I need to do to get to the next level? And the answer is just keep doing what you're doing. And it's like, what does that mean?
It means
What's the timeline for that? What is the next step? And like all of these things are just undefined and thrown in the bucket of like, you're doing great, keep doing what you're doing. Because there's been such a commoditization of what architects do, because fees have gone down, because project budgets are lower, because they need it done faster, because there are all these reasons, right? So, man, like you're talking about potentially like a radical transformation. I don't know that we're up for it. I'll just put my hand up and say, that's like an open question. Are we up for it? Because the other argument is like that I've heard many times is like you can't change something that big from the inside. You got to burn it down and start over, right? And I'm sure you've heard that too. And I don't. That's not what you're advocating for. You're advocating for radical transformation from within with the companies who already exist. So I just threw a bunch of stuff out there, but I'm just curious, what that triggers for you.
So the way I look at it is like I've never met an architect who's an owner or an architect who is a full-time employee working for an organization who has the desire for the firm to not make money. I've never met an architect or an employee that says like that is what I want for the place that I work at.
Well, yeah, that would be a charity, right? Like you can't, it doesn't work, right?
What I do hear a lot is I want to do incredible work. I want to be creative, and I want the business wherever I'm working at to be very, very successful also. And I'll be very proud to be part of that organization. And I was like, great. I think you're already halfway there, especially if the work is already good. I think we just got to make some of the constraints a lot more transparent. And there are constraints that every project has that has been opaque for a very long time. And we can start with the easiest ones. The easiest one is, well, what is the project budget? Let's make sure that that's clear, and we should advocate that every project does have a project budget. And there's a way that we can measure against that project budget over time to help us stay on track. Let's work on that. Second, once you know the constraints, I need everyone to adhere to them. The constraints are a nice to have. The constraints are a constraint. I want ideally all of our customers across the board to do amazing work within the constraints of their budget so that the project can still come out net positive and the firm can be very, very successful. I think when we drive those alignments, it isn't a burn everything down type of move. It is more of a transformation because like we're halfway there, and we see it all the time with our customers getting there on Monograph. So like I know it's absolutely possible.
Yeah, that when you say that, talking about like following the constraints, that's a hard thing for a lot of architects, right? Because architects by nature are kind of rule breakers. If they can't, like you find creative workarounds. That's a nice way of saying rule breaker, right? But there's been a lot of times in firms working my way up through the years where it's like the rules apply to the people who are the lowest on the ladder, and the rules get broken all the time by the people who are the highest on the ladder because the rules don't apply to them a lot of times. And so when you talk about this, like it really has to apply to everybody for that to work. When everybody is aligned that the business needs to be successful so that we can continue to do our work or even do better work, get better at it. Yeah. It really does have to apply to everybody because you are talking about transformation, and transformation can't only happen with a few people in certain roles. Yeah.
No. So I think if you're a young designer early in your career, the best thing we can do for you as a Monograph customer is you're learning financial literacy sooner now because you're on Monograph. If you are an experienced principal and you've been working in the industry for 20, 30 years plus, I think this is a great tool to help you stay aligned. The objective for every firm is to do good work and do good work while also being profitable. If you do good work and you're not profitable, you might not have an opportunity or a right to continue to do good work Because if you're not profitable at some point, you're on your way to zero. Like that's not a good scenario.
Right.
So I think it is a rule that everyone should learn to follow and learn to respect. At the end of the day, we are an industry, and the industry needs to continue to grow, and we need to continue to be profitable to invest in ourselves continuously. We cannot invest if there is nothing to invest in. So it's really, really important that the topic of money is talked about.
Let's take a short break from the conversation to invite you to join the most influential technology leaders in the AEC industry at Confluence. Composed of in-person events and a podcast co-hosted by yours truly, Confluence is designed to foster conversations between AEC firms and technology companies so they can learn, share, and engage with each other to support industry innovation. Software company Avail, which creates content management solutions for the AEC industry, started hosting Confluence events in 2019 to understand what firms are needing, wanting, and thinking around technology. To learn more about Confluence, explore upcoming events, and listen to podcast episodes, go to confluence.getavail.com. My thanks to Confluence for supporting this episode of the TRXL podcast. And now, let's get back to the conversation. Yeah, I think this also kind of goes back to how architects are bred, which is competitively, right? That happens in school, and then it continues on in business. And a lot of times you'll see somebody with the attitude that for me to win, you have to lose. And you are taking a different stance by bringing this idea of radical transparency to the industry and really talking about rising all boats, right? Because you're talking about success for the industry, not individual customers or individual firms, because there is a lot of work to be done. Mm-hmm. We all know the built environment could benefit from the work that architects and engineers are doing. And that's a very small percentage of the overall built environment is done by those professionals, right? So there seems to be a ton of potential here, and you are also shifting the perspective with your language, your messaging, your benchmarks here to say, like, we are in this together. I know that sounds a bit cliched, but
we are. Yeah. We are, absolutely. Like, how else do we talk about the industry if we aren't in part of that industry?
Right. Yeah. Well, okay, so let's start to talk about how this could happen. I mean, you've got advice in your report, or at least you have actionable data. And so I'm curious, like, how can firms increase revenue per employee? Because that seems to be, I think that was one of the main talking points in the report, right? Is like showing how big of a difference there actually is in our industry of revenue per full-time employee.
There's a lot of ways to increase revenue per employee. We can start to generalize it in a few things. The first thing that we see almost immediately is there's an efficiency metric that starts to immediately play out once you're a Monograph customer. Because I think once a firm, once an architect understands where their time is going and where their time is not being utilized correctly, the natural chain of decisions is you stop spending time in areas where it's not effective. So the efficiency, the utilization of a per employee basis goes up. When that goes up, what naturally follows is the revenue per employee. So I think it goes back to the original topic of, as long as transparency starts to exist and starts to foster within organizations, everyone makes better decisions, your utilization rate goes up, which means your revenue per employee also goes up.
It sounds like you're talking about accountability in there too, right? It's like, because it's so visible, I mean, it creates an awareness of the things that you're actually working on, but then it also creates an awareness of what others are working on around you. And then the accountability goes up because it's like, oh, now we're going to make these decisions together, more or less, just to say, that isn't working, right? We need to stop doing that. We need to stop doing that. We, the firm, right? So I'm curious if you have examples of the kinds of things that you're talking about here. Are there things that people become aware of where it's like obvious we need to stop doing that?
So there's a few things we do very clearly, like things turn red when they're not good.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, how do people know? Because everybody's already putting their time in a spreadsheet in some, you can call it a glorified spreadsheet, even if it's a spreadsheet still, right? But it's like, I put these hours in and then I send it to somebody and it goes into the black hole of accounting, right? And so to your point, like you're doing something visual, bringing it back to your conversation topic about making it visual for architects, because we're so visual. We're really good at pattern recognition. I know what red means. Red means bad, right? So that's a great example. It's very simple.
Red means bad, green means good. These are universal languages. Architects, designers know this very, very well because we're trained to understand the world visually. So we spend a considerable amount of time of not just designing a great software, but really trying to understand what is the takeaway and how do we communicate that very effectively, very quickly. So yes, as soon as you enter time, the old way is it goes into the ether and you never see it again.
Maybe someone gets a talking to, right? Like that's kind of what, and you're always maybe a little worried that that's going to happen when you hit that submit button, right?
The fascinating thing is we've been doing this for years now, is as soon as you enter a time, everything moves. So the feedback back to you is immediate, which also encourages a young designer and an architect to enter accurate time. Because like, oh my God, like if I do put in correct information, I get feedback immediately. And by knowing that, I can make decisions different as a project.
Or have a conversation, right?
So I don't want to wait till the end of the week to put 40 hours on a project. I might want to enter time as soon as I know I should be entering time, because it's going to make all the difference between me deciding to do 10 iterations or 5 iterations. And that decision is almost the very small microcosm of like a profitable employee or not. And they're embedded in those decisions, and we need to have an influence right before you make those decisions, and we need to surface the right information to you at the right time. It's really, really important.
Well, I've been through the experience many times of like staffing and forecasting for projects, right? And we talked a little bit earlier about like if you don't have good data, it's really hard to do that, right? You can't do it well. It'll probably not be right. You'll just be adjusting it along the way over and over and over again. Is there a component of forecasting in the tools that you provide? Like if you pre-fill out your timesheet with what you think is going to happen that week, for example, can we then see, here's where that's going to lead us if we start doing that? Or maybe you can just kind of explain how we can start to get ahead of these problems a little bit even more than kind of just entering your stuff in real time.
This is really, really exciting in terms of getting ahead on the forecasting side. We can start as early as when a project starts and you have a contract at hand. We've built some amazing new technology with an underlying infrastructure that's embedded on AI that can read your contract and pre-fill the entire plan for a project instantly.
Nice.
So we can see how many different phases you have. We can see how long they are and how much each phase is. And then we can look at the entire company's staff and figure out who is the right person to work on it and start pre-filling that time in. We can also say, based on experience and based on like historical typologies of work, we can make a suggestion in how to like think about staffing and resourcing and what that might look like for the project to be done on time and on budget.
Yeah. I just, when you talk about kind of resources and staffing, I worked in a large firm, and so maybe this is different in a 10-person firm, but maybe it isn't, right? Which is like staffing is partly what the job is. It's partly what the skill sets needed are. It's mostly who's available, right? It's like this weird this combination, this really nuanced thing. And so like something that I had toyed around with was coming up with a way to find out, obviously, what the skill sets of people are, what their staffing, what projects they're staffed on, what their experience is, and who do they want to be, I think was another important component of that. Like, what do they want to do with their next step of their career? And then finding opportunities based on upcoming projects to kind of start to link that together. But I know that's asking a lot, right? But it seems like there's got to be, and it's interesting now. Like AI wasn't around, it wasn't a thing when I was talking about doing that, but now that it is, maybe there's additional ways to kind of link into the different systems across a business to start to align those things so that they can happen and help projects be more successful because you have the right people with the right skill sets and experiences and availability and desires for their own career development to align with what's coming up or what's right around the corner.
Bro, I do think where technology is evolving and very quickly, this is very attainable, very, very attainable. And we're spending a considerable amount of our R&D efforts in making sure that we are at the forefront of that end.
So you're saying I was ahead of my time.
You were ahead of your time.
Thanks, Robert.
But right now, it's totally achievable. Totally
Yeah.
achievable. Like I think.
Yeah, I mean, have you done this thing where like it's been going around, like ask ChatGPT who is Evan Troxel, who is Robert Yuen, and out of everything you know about me, right? Tell me a story or write up a bio or something like that, and it's based on the things that you have asked it and the things about you on the internet. It can do a pretty good job of that and figuring out. It's pretty interesting to your point. Like we're at the doable stage of this kind of a.
It's not a dream anymore. It's totally achievable. And as long as that data set is a very good data set, a complete data set, there's no reason why we can't deliver those features today. And like we've already have, which is incredible. And we continue to invest in that direction. Because at the end of the day, if a firm is doing amazingly well and profitable, then the next step is to make sure that architects are using the rest of their time designing, doing what you came into the industry doing, which is your passion to create the built environment. And the less administrative work I can take off of your shoulders, the more time you have to be creative. This is where tooling and software absolutely gives you an advantage and a lever. That if you didn't have, you would be doing it manually, which would take up a lot of time and reduce the amount of time you have for creative freedom.
Yeah. One of the big prompts in your report, speaking of AI, I guess, I just have that prompt idea floating here, but this idea of salaries and competitive salaries and things, maybe you can just kind of speak to the overall where the industry is when it comes to that, because you're talking about profitability, you're talking about success, and this is an industry that chronically pays people very low wages, especially new graduates, right? There are definitely architects who make a really good living, for sure, right? But I wouldn't say that applies across the board. And I would also say that for the risk that is involved in architecture and the complexity and all of these things, we're an underpaid industry. Can you talk about kind of, going back to this idea of radical transparency and the relationship of competitiveness in salary ranges throughout the industry, kind of where we are?
So I think everyone who's in the industry knows that they would love to make more money. And I think everyone in the industry doesn't know what the profit margins are on either the firm or on their project. I do believe that as long as you work on that margin over time, salaries go up. They're generally capped because there isn't enough margin left to redistribute, which forces a very difficult decision for most firm owners is to keep salaries low because there isn't really any room left, if you look at it from an annualized budget, to pull the salaries from, to increase it. So as long as the profit margins are there, I believe that the salaries almost always follow. And that goes back down to knowing your numbers, working towards efficiencies, and getting your utilization up across the board. Because then once you lift profit margins, those profit margins historically across all business sectors gets redistributed back to the team. Now, what do we do until that happens?
Yeah, because that switch doesn't get flipped and everything changes, right?
No, it takes time. It takes time. So I think until that happens, I think it helps the entire industry to just talk about, well, what does businesses make and what is the average employee salary across the industry, and have radical transparency and radical candor around what does that mean. One, I believe it's going to force the conversation around finances a lot deeper, and everyone's going to have a deeper understanding. Well, why is my salary this number? If you ask a firm owner, it was like, well, it's a firm size of 10, so you can multiply by 10. Then we have overhead. Then we have a software spend. We have a lot of expenses. So this is like the net cost to just run the business. And then we have to essentially make that to cover. And then anything extra is profit, and we can redistribute that profit over time. But it really starts to get everyone on the same page of, well, where does your salary come from? Why is it the way it is? And now that we're all on the same page, let's work on it. But I think it does start first right now today that we at least are open and transparent in having the conversations around what are billings, what are utilizations, and what are salaries.
Hey everyone, let's take a quick break from the conversation to pay some bills around here. This episode of TRXL is brought to you by TRXL Plus members. That's right, my incredible paid supporter members are making this episode possible. Their direct support ensures that I can continue exploring the intersection of architecture, technology, and the future of design with the leading voices in our industry directly to you. So let's talk about why you might consider financially supporting the podcast too. By becoming a TRXL Plus supporter, you're not just helping sustain these conversations, you're also gaining exclusive benefits like ad-free episodes of the show and my Leadership Edge email newsletter, where I analyze episodes and deliver the insights and key takeaways right into your inbox. Your small contribution makes a huge impact. And if you've been enjoying TRXL and want to be part of the community that keeps it thriving, please consider joining today. Head on over to trxl.co and click the subscribe button either in the upper right-hand corner or at the bottom of the page, or you can visit the link that I've put into the show notes. Once again, my sincerest thanks to the TRXL Plus members who have made this episode of the podcast possible, even though they aren't even hearing this ad because theirs are ad-free. Now, let's get back to the conversation. Yeah, it's one of those common LinkedIn posts about raising salaries. And then it just kind of opens the can of worms, right? Which is, okay, well then firms need to make more money and we need to change contracts. And there's a lot of kind of fundamental things about the business model, the way the profession operates, the delivery process, all of the different stakeholder groups putting pressure. There's a lot that potentially has to change. And so you're right, it's not going to happen quickly. But at the same time, we have to know where we're going in order to get there. And we have to decide that that's where we want to go together. So the call to action really is to have this radical transparency conversation about salaries so that we can address the actual issue, right? Which is the higher level stuff that you're talking about.
Well, I think once everyone knows, then the alignment and the focus around execution becomes a lot clearer. Because then it's a little bit less of a debate where I don't get paid a lot because I just don't get paid a lot. It's like, well, that's not quite how the world works. Like, if the firm makes a lot of money, then like usually it trickles down across the firm. Mm-hmm. So you can see sometimes with the highest earning organizations, they also pay their employees the most. Because that revenue gets redistributed across the team.
Yeah, and those companies are leveraging those people in really great ways to earn a profit, right? Like that's exactly why they're there, right? Is to do something more efficiently and faster than somebody else can do it, and it makes business sense for them to do that. So it is a flywheel of some sort, right?
It is a flywheel, and I think once you have a benchmark, it's much easier to then continue to work on that problem and see the gains year over year. Because then we all know that, oh, it is improving. We are all working on it together as an industry, and our average salaries are improving year over year. Our speed to payments are improving year over year. Our utilization across the board is improving year over year. And the revenue per employee is growing year over year. And if we can confidently say that year over year, we should be really, really excited as an industry, and we're moving in the right direction.
It seems like as an employee, I mean, I don't know if it matters how long you've been in the industry. But if you're asking these kinds of questions in an interview because you're interviewing the firm that you could potentially be working for just as much as they're interviewing you, to me, those are actually really important things to understand about the firm you could potentially be signing up with, right? Is to understand their business and how focused are they on those kinds of metrics? How focused are they on running a profitable business? In what ways do they reward employees for, doing the thing that they're hired to do, but in order to help their business be more successful? It starts to become a much richer. I mean, you're not just going to a place because you like the work they do as much in that scenario as you're trying to find the right fit for so many different dimensions of being an employee, right? It's not just about the work. It's about all of these things together.
Well, it's a relationship. And I would treat if you are an individual looking for employment, I think you're looking for a relationship, and you should treat it like a relationship. So obviously the work should look good, and you should be excited about the body of work that comes out of the firm. But you should also understand that you're joining something that's a healthy relationship for you. And you can define what healthy means in your case. But you should have a clear understanding, well, what's the right culture fit? What's healthy? What's an environment where you can learn from? Who are you going to learn from? Does the business value growth? How do I participate in that growth? How do you define growth? These are really, really important questions as you kind of like commit to joining a relationship and working for a great firm.
Yeah. Well said. Is there anything that I'm missing here when it comes to kind of big topics from the benchmark report?
Well, what's really, really exciting about the benchmark report is we can compare our benchmark report with other benchmark reports.
Meta. You're going meta. Nice.
Well, I think it starts to validate why I believe, I'm very biased here, I'm CEO and co-founder of Monograph, why I believe our product, designed from the bottom up, has always been customer-centric, because like the founders are all architects. And our only passion is to help architects and engineers be successful. And that will never waver. And I think that results in a fantastic product over time that then yields incredible results. So I'll give you an example. Like I had a chance to also dig through BQE's benchmark report, and our customers get paid 65% faster because of Monograph. They also make $22,000 more per employee, 30% more utilized, and like they're 60% less unbillable fees across the board. And these are two different customer bases, two different benchmark reports, and we win across every line item. And that makes me really, really excited, because one, it means that we're doing a great job here at Monograph. It also means that we are competitive, and we got to continue to work on delivering amazing results for architects and engineers.
Yeah, nice. I think the call to action here when it comes to transparency and actually getting a better understanding of the business of architecture, right? Like that's really what we're talking about here. You guys popularized, or maybe invented, I don't know if this is worthy of the invented title, but the hashtag practice ops, right? And there was a lot of resources that you have dedicated to educating the architectural community, the AEC community, in why this stuff matters. And so when it comes to like the business of architecture and the evolution of the business of architecture that you're really pushing for through the starting point of transparency, I think is really interesting. And I hope, I don't know, you tell me, what's been the response so far? I know this is still early since this report came out, but these are kind of the same values that you've been touting for years now, right? So what is the kind of the general feedback response? And we'll finish up with this.
So the general feedback response has been super amazing. And I think for those who have been following Monograph for years, know that we haven't changed our position. Like our job is to make sure our customers are really, really successful financially. And that will never waver. I think for people who are just starting to recognize some of our resources, we're ecstatic that this is a resource that is available. And I'm really proud to continue to deliver that. And the team here is really, really proud to continue to deliver that. And I hope to continue to deliver that at a higher bar every single year.
Nice. Something just popped into my head, Robert, and this is maybe a weird question to ask, but do you consider Monograph a design tool?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, we have to define the word design.
Well, I've said it many times on this podcast that like the business of architecture is a design problem, but a lot of firms don't look at it like that.
Well, I do think of it in that way. And I think you and I have known each other for years now, and I've always thought about business as a design problem. I'm a designer. I want to solve problems, and I think of this as a very clear design problem. Does the rest of the industry sees it that way? Probably not. To be very honest, probably not. Like we're not a Autodesk product. We're not like a BIM product.
You're not a geometry product or a pixel. No. You're not pushing pixels, right? You're doing data entry, but you're getting these kind of insights and reports and making important decisions about how you pursue design problems, quote unquote, design, projects. And to me, and in that way, it actually is design software, but it's for the business, right?
For the business. It's design software for the business. I believe in that 100%. I also want everyone to always understand that like my focus is really like I want to help firms be financially strong, build a financial literacy over time, be radically transparent about how a business is performing, and I'll leave the traditional design tooling software to amazing software companies that solely focus on that. Yeah. There's a lot of incredible companies that have been around for a long time. There's a lot of companies that are very new that are doing amazing work around three-dimensional geometry in the browser, revolutionizing tech in that space. That is not my focus. My focus really comes down to a financial number that I really want to help the industry grow, and a conversation around financial literacy that I want to continue to foster.
All right, so we won't be modeling in Monograph, this three-dimensional modeling, but maybe some financial modeling.
Yes.
Project modeling. Well, Robert, there's been a great conversation. I'll put a link to the report, the benchmark report, in the show notes for this episode for those who are interested in seeing the current status of financial outlay in our industry. I mean, it's really an interesting piece of work that you guys have put together and made available to everybody. And so kudos to you for taking on the hard work. I think the name of the last episode was you've basically signed up to do the hard things in this industry. And so the work continues. Yep, the work continues. So thanks, Robert.
Thank you.
All right, let's wrap this up. During the introduction to this episode, I said that transparency in architecture must become the new standard. My guest today, Robert Yuen, supported this with several examples during our conversation. Number one, opaque financials lead to misalignment. He points out that most architects, especially those working on project teams, are disconnected from the financial realities of the projects they're working on. They focus on design quality, but rarely understand budget constraints, fee structures, or what success looks like financially. Robert says, it's incredibly hard to ask a project team to execute and work on a project without having a clear line of sight of what the financials look like. Without that transparency, teams can unknowingly overdeliver, blow through budgets, or miss the mark entirely on firm goals. Number two, bad data equals bad decisions. He highlights that many firms still base key business decisions on survey data or fictional time tracking, which are often inaccurate and misleading. He said, you're making decisions off of data that's not correct. It's near impossible to succeed if you start off with a bad foundation. Transparency allows firms to base decisions on real, objective, and timely data, essential for making smart, sustainable choices. Number three, transparency creates accountability. By exposing how time is spent and how projects are performing in real time, for example, using the red and green visual indicators that we talked about during the episode as pattern recognition, Team members are empowered to course correct early. This provides an immediate feedback loop that encourages staff to enter accurate time because they see how it changes things right away. This immediacy builds a culture of accountability and continuous improvement. Number 4, it levels the playing field. Robert criticizes traditional industry reports that reflect only the largest firms, leaving out 90% of the profession made up by small firms. He said, "You're surveying the wrong people to describe an entire industry. Almost 90% of the industry is small." Transparency through anonymized real-time data offers a more representative benchmark that all firms, especially small ones, can use to measure and improve. Number 5, transparency fosters equity and growth. When employees understand how profit is generated and how their work contributes to it, they're better positioned to advocate for themselves and align with firm success. Robert believes that as long as you work on that margin over time, salaries go up. But it starts first with being open and transparent. Without visibility into firm performance, conversations around salaries, bonuses, and promotions remain vague and subjective. Okay, last one here, number 6. It's the only path to evolving the profession. Robert's long-term goal is to improve financial literacy in the profession and empower architects to make better business decisions because design alone isn't enough to sustain practice. The objective for every firm is to do good work and to do good work while also being profitable. Transparency is what enables this shift, transforming the profession from one rooted in secrecy and tradition to one grounded in clarity, empowerment, and shared success. So, in conclusion, transparency must become the new standard because it aligns teams around reality, not fiction. It reduces inefficiency and waste. It unlocks equity and growth opportunities, and it enables informed collaborative transformation across the industry. Okay, that's it for this one. Remember, I love reading your comments, so leave one over on LinkedIn for my post for this episode or on YouTube, and I'll see you in the next one.